What's up, icons? It's the iconic fashion figure. I've done a video on pricing in the past, but I want to do an updated one because our economy has changed so much. Everything is inflated, cost of everything is going up, and I want to make sure you guys are keeping up with this economy and you have the right pricing for your business as well. So let's make sure you're calculating your pricing right, and I'm going to show you guys examples too.
She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment. Now come on now.
But to start out, I do want to list out all the items that you should be including in your pricing to make sure you're covering everything and you're not actually losing money. Because a mistake I commonly see when people are creating their pricing, they only think about the cost of the item and just mark that up, but they don't think about everything else that goes into that item. So let's talk about that. All the things that you should include in your pricing when calculating the price you charge your customers. Number one, of course, is the cost of the item. And then include any shipping that you might be paying to receive that item as well. You might have to pay, per box, and you'll have multiple items in there, but calculate on average how much that cost is per item that you have in that box, and make sure you add that into your cost as well. Then the next thing you'll want to make sure you add on for your cost of the item is any packaging that you add on, such as garment labels, hang tags, poly bags, branded stickers, anything like that you might be adding on to that particular item. Make sure you include that in your cost. The next thing is any labor cost. Make sure you include any labor that you have to put into this item, and that can be any labor such as sourcing the item, receiving the item in. If you're repacking that item once you receive it, the labor that it cost you to package that item, which I'll show you how to calculate the labor in a moment, and then the labor to actually pack it up and ship it back out. Any labor that is done on your end, make sure you calculate that into your cost as well. Number 4 is going to be promotional materials. So any promotional or marketing that you do for that particular item, you'll want to include in your cost so you can make your money back on the marketing. Or some people like to include cute little thank you for your order, thank you for shopping with me flyers in their orders. Include that in your cost as well. Number 5 is commissions, which everyone may not have, but if you're paying any commissions to brand ambassadors, influencers, sales representatives, anything like that to help you push the item and sell it, if you're paying commissions off of that, you'll want to calculate that percentage into the cost as well. And then number 6 is the free shipping, or are you charging shipping? You'll want to calculate the cost of the shipping, because surprisingly, most companies that offer you free shipping, they have that cost of shipping built in somewhere into their pricing. So you'll want to calculate about how much it would cost you to ship that item and include that in your pricing as well. But if you're not offering free shipping and you're charging the shipping at checkout, you can skip that part. You don't have to include that in the cost of the item. But let me quickly show you guys an example of how to calculate the cost of the item. Now I'm hoping you guys can see this board because it's not really looking like you can actually read it. Basically, what I have on the board right now is just a list of things we need to include in our pricing that I just given to you guys, but I'll run through it again. So I have the cost of the item, any packaging, labor cost, promotional materials, commissions, and then if we're going to include shipping in the pricing or if we're going to have it calculated at checkout. So let me run through an example of how you'll create your pricing. So let's start with the cost of the item because that's of course most important. That's usually your starting point. So let's say I'm buying an item, whatever item I decide to buy, and the cost of that item is $10. I'm going to try to write it big so hopefully it makes it easier for you guys to read. But we have on here $10 for that item. Now, of course, if you have to pay any shipping to receive that item, you'll want to include that in the cost of the item. But I'm just going to do a rounded number, $10 for the item. The next step is to go into any packaging. So let's say we're adding on garment labels, hang tags. You have any custom stickers on the item, like jeans will have those stickers, some of the shirts will have them, any poly bags or anything like that you're paying for. You want to calculate about how much you would spend per item on the packaging. So to just give an estimated number, I'm going to put $2. Now in our next step is labor cost, and I'm not talking about labor cost to actually make the item. Whoever you're buying that item from already included their labor in the cost of the item, but you want to think of any labor costs that you have to do. So how I figured out the labor cost for a garment is take an hourly rate that you would pay yourself, or if you have employees that's doing the work for you, take their hourly rate. So let's say we have an employee that we're paying $20 an hour, and I'm just throwing out any random number. I'm not telling you guys how much you need to pay someone to do this specific work, but $20 an hour is going to be the example for this video. And I usually break it down on how much I have to pay them per minute, because it usually isn't a full hour labor per item. If it is, then you would use the $20 amount. But if it doesn't require from your end a full hour, I break it down by the minute of what I would pay that person. So let's say, so the $20 an hour would break down, if you do the math, it breaks down to 0.3333 is like the endless threes per minute. So now if, let's say for this particular item that we're pricing out right now, I spend about 10 minutes on that item in labor on my end. So I'll times that 0.333 times the 10 minutes that it takes me on that particular item, and it gives you about $3.33 for that item in labor. Now the next thing we need to add in there is the promotional materials. So let's say you create some sort of ad or advertising, a flyer for this item, maybe those little thank you inserts that'll go every time you ship that item. How much is that costing you? Usually this one here isn't too much, because the promotional marketing for most brands, they usually do it for the entire company unless you have few items or like a new item. So you're doing this promotion campaign for that particular item, then of course include that. But for this one, I'm going to keep it very minimal and say like 50 cents if I was doing like the flyers or something that would go with every shipment. And the next thing that I'm going to go into is commissions. Now, everyone may not have this one here, but commissions is the next step. So if you're paying brand ambassadors, if you're paying influencers, if you have sales reps that you are paying, are you paying them commission for every piece that they sell? So they're getting a percentage of every order. So for that, let's say we're paying a sales rep 10% for every order that they sell of this item. I usually just add up what I have here so far and times it by 10%. But to throw in a rounded number, I'm just gonna say we pay $1.50 per item in commission. And then that last thing is shipping. Are you going to include the price of shipping in this item, or are you going to charge shipping at checkout? Most companies that offer free shipping, they usually have the cost of shipping built into the item. That's why I added it on this list. For this sake, I'm not going to bother adding in shipping. I'm going to say we're going to charge shipping at checkout. So now what I have to do is add up all these numbers that I have so far. And my total after all of these numbers is $17.33. That would be my grand total of what it costs to make and sell this item to a customer. So now that we figured out the cost of the item, this imaginary item that we're selling today, we now need to start figuring out what exactly are we going to charge for to our customers. So what is that pricing going to be that we're charging the customers? Before we deep dive into calculating the actual price of the item that we're selling it at, we want to actually do some market research. Let's research the value of this item in the industry currently. Let's see if there's any competitors out there that's selling this item and what they're selling it for. Now, when we're looking at what other people are selling this item for, doesn't mean that that's exactly where you have to price it at, because we don't know if that person that you're researching is actually at the right price. They can be lowballing themselves and not making enough money off of it, or their pricing could be way too high and they're not even really moving that item. So just because we're doing that research and seeing what others are selling it at does not mean we have to match their exact price. This is just giving us an idea of what that item is going for in the market, or similar items are going for in the market. In this research step, you also want to understand what your customers are willing to pay. You should already have an idea of who your target market is. So are you selling to more of a luxury community where they'll pay top dollar for their items, or are you selling to like college students that might be on a limited budget and they need pricing as low as they can get it because they're stretching every dollar that they have. Understand who you are selling to, what their income is like, because that'll give you an idea of where you're pricing your items at. Once you do that research step and figure out the market and where similar items are being priced at, you can now go into actually pricing your item. And normally I price my items based off of the gross margin. Some may do it based off of the markup percentage. You can use which one you prefer, but I'll explain both of them to you. So your profit margin is basically the percentage that we're going to be adding on to the cost of the item, and that's how much you'll actually be making off of that item, hence the word profit. And then when it comes to markup, it's basically figuring out how much you're actually going to increase the cost of the item to get to your selling point. So both in the end is going to get you to what we're trying to figure out. It's just the way that you prefer to look at it, the percentage you choose to use. So I'm going to go into showing you guys how to calculate your profit margin or your markup, so that way you can actually figure out what price you're going to sell your item at. So now that we know the cost to actually make that item that we're trying to sell to our customers, we had our pricing at $17.33 for the item. We now need to figure out exactly what we're going to charge the customer for, and then how much money you're making off of that item per piece. So that's where we get into the profit margin and markup. Some people create their pricing based off the margin, some do it based off markup. I'm going to show you both. So as I was just discussing, we're going to do the profit margin between 50 and 75%, which would give you a markup about 100% to 300%. Basically 100% would be doubling your money, so it'll be doubling that $17.33, and then we'll go up from there because we want to at least double the money on the item. So let's talk about So I'm going to do 3 different examples in this video to show you guys. Now, I just talked about research on like the market value and what your customers would actually pay for. So this would be for you to decide which percentage you're actually going to use. But the 3 examples that I'm going to use in this video to show you guys is a 50% margin, a 60% margin, and a 75% margin. Okay, so in the first example, we have 50% margin, which there are margin calculators you guys can use, and I'll link them down in the description box. You don't actually have to sit there and use the formulas to create them. But if you would like the margin formula, I'll definitely put that on the screen for you as well. But if we do a 50% margin, which I mentioned would just double that $17.33, we would get $34.66. Which of course gives you $17.33 in profit. And that 50% margin equates to 100% markup. And now let's say for those of you that are buying your pre-packs in 6 pieces, like the standard industry, so you have 6 pieces of this item that we're paying $17.33 per item. If you sell all 6 pieces at the full price, you're looking at $103.98 in profit just off of one pre-pack. So at that 50% margin, that gives us $34.66 as our price. That would basically be what you would charge your customer. So to round it up and make it even, we'll say $35. Now I'm going into 60% margin. Again, use the calculator to calculate it. But for our example, at 60% margin, you basically would be at $43.33. And that would give you $25.99 in profit per piece. And of course, 60% margin would equate to 150% markup. So to give a rounded number, at 60% margin, you would basically be charging your customers $43 per piece. And And for the last example today, which would be 75% margin, that would equate to 300% markup. And at 75% margin, your pricing would be $69.32. Which would give you a profit of $51.99 per piece. So to go with the rounded number, we can do 69 here. You can do $70. Of course, when you're creating your pricing and we get those numbers like 35 or 43 or 69, you don't have to use those exact numbers to charge your customers. That just lets you know about where you should be. So let's say you have that $35 at the 50% markup, but you want to end all of your pricing with a 7 for whatever reason. You end it how you choose to, but let's say you want to end it in a 7 or even a 0. You could push it up to $40 or $37 to match your pricing. But that is how you would calculate the pricing, and then based off of the market research that you did, you would determine if you're going to charge $35 for this item, if you're going to charge $43 or $69, what would your customers pay for that item? Of course, if you can go higher, definitely go higher because you make more. But if you have to stay on the lower end, I would say don't go any less than that 50% margin. So I've just shown you guys how to calculate the actual price that you'll be charging your customers, which I did 3 different examples. So you can be selling the same item at $35, at $43, at $69. Now, since you just did your market research, you would use that market research that you did, seeing where the comps are, what others are selling similar items for, as well as what your customer would typically pay for this item. So let's say, for example, most of the comps are at like $40. So that's kind of in between our 50% margin and our 60% margin. But we actually have a luxury clientele who would pay top dollar for items. I personally, instead of going low, I would test it out. I like to take risk and try things. Since I have a luxury customer and my marketing is going to reflect luxury and not, low end, I would most likely go with that 75% margin and charge that $69 pricing. And that gives me the highest profit. So off of a $17.33 cost item, I would be making $51.99. It's a really good margin there. So that's what I would go with if that's what my clientele would pay for that item. But of course, if I have, a middle class customer or a college student and the comps are at $40, I would probably go $43. But if you're marketing more towards that college student, you might want to go a little lower and do that $35 because you might actually sell more than your comps if those college students can't afford that $40. So you want to pay attention to who your market is and where you can really price that at, not necessarily always looking at how much you're making off of it, because you can of course go based off you want to make the most money as possible, but if it's not moving, you have to mark it down anyway. You're not really making that much. So you want to do your research and pay attention to which margin you want to use. I know for me personally, I have like a range of my margins that I would use for my item. So I know for me, I won't go lower than a certain percentage, which I recommend to you guys. Don't go lower than that 50% margin. You want to at least double the money on the item that you're selling. But in today's market, most are even higher than that. I will let you know for sure, a lot of retail stores are more so 65% margin now. They let go of that concept of doubling the price and selling it there. That's not really the industry standard anymore. Of course, you can do that if needed, but a lot of companies now are going 60 and up. So figure out which margin is best for you and then calculate it there for every item. And I like to have that range because then if there is a pricing of an item that the factory gives me, and I know if I try to price it at my usual margin and the pricing is just too high for what I can sell it at, then I know to leave that item alone. Or if they give me a really good price on an item, I know I can sell it for much higher. I know that item's a money maker. So chances are I'm going to buy a little more of that than I usually would because I know I can blow that out at that pricing that they're giving me. So that's why I like to have that range in my mind, so that way when the factory sends me pricing, or let's say you're buying wholesale and you see that listed price for an item, you can kind of quickly calculate in your mind, okay, let's say at 60% margin, margin. This is about what I would have to charge. I can't sell that to my customer. That's way too high. Or I can mark this up even higher than that and make a whole lot more money. So I'm definitely buying that. Use that as a guide as you're shopping wholesale. That's why I warn a lot of you guys not to jump right into just buying an item, but to actually do your research first before you jump into buying it, because a lot of people get stuck with inventory that they can't move or they end up losing money. But anyway, there's a bunch of calculators out there that will calculate these numbers for you if you don't want to do the math, if you're not one that's really good with math. There's 2 of them that I've given in a previous video, which again, I'll link down in the description box. A lot of you guys use Shopify, which you don't even have to have a Shopify account, but Shopify does have a calculator as well that you can use to price your items. So I'll link that one down in the description box as well. And another thing I do want to mention, that there's some other factors you want to think about when creating your pricing for an item that I didn't show in this video, but you definitely want to keep in mind when pricing your items. Those are basically like your fixed expenses that you know you have to pay every month regardless of if you're selling or not. So you kind of want to think about those items as well when pricing your item. And some of those other things to think of is like overhead costs. Are you paying rent, utilities, things like that? Those would be your overhead costs to actually operate your business, especially if you're renting a location. Rent has to be paid in order to keep going. So you want to think about those costs and calculate that into your pricing as well. You also have other business expenses like your internet and phone, which I guess you can probably calculate under utilities as well. But any software that you might be using to operate your business, if you're paying monthly for your website or annually for your website, all those expenses that keep your business going, you want to think about that. And usually I would just pull all of that together and use a percentage per item that I would tack on. Let's say you might add on additional 1% or 3% to your pricing, so that way those expenses are covered as well. So don't forget to think about your fixed expenses also. I didn't show that in this example, but basically that 1733 that we came about, you would just add on 1% or 3% and bring it up a little higher to cover those fixed expenses. But that's all I have for today's video on pricing, because I know inflation has changed things. So I want to make sure you guys are pricing your items right so you're not forced out of business in this crazy economy. Thank you guys for watching.